President Kagame is, I think, one of the most coveted leaders across not just Africa, but the world. I was actually talking to the manager of Mayweather.
And he personally told you?
He wants Mayweather to come and congratulate President Kagame upon after his inauguration. This is music to my ears. M23 want to reach an agreement, a peaceful agreement with the government in Congo. I've written an article called Apartheid at Uganda's Immigration. There is this discrimination of Rwandans.
Hello, everyone. My guest this week on the Long-Form podcast is Andrew Mwenda. Andrew is a renowned Ugandan publisher, journalist, and political commentator. We discuss his personal relationship with President Kagame, the state of Uganda-Rwanda relations, and also discuss and unpack regional issues. Before we dive into today's conversation, have you subscribed to our channel yet? If you haven't, do so. And remember to share your thoughts with us in the comments below and like this video. Your support means a lot. Now let's get into it. Andrew?
Sanny?
Welcome to the Long Form.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And thank you for making time. I know I've been bothering you for the last couple of days. Yes. Andrew, come on.
And I'm going to send you my fee note for this.
I hope it's not too much. Oh, and make sure it's in Uganda shilling.
I was thinking of dollars.
Let's go straight into the conversation. You're here. You're a regular visit to Rwanda. I mean, that's how I got to know you at my former place of work. But this time, you're here to attend President Kagame's inauguration tomorrow, Sunday. And you're part of General Muhoozi Kainerugaba's delegation. For those who don't know, General Muhoozi is the Chief of Defense Staff of the Ugandan UPDF, the Ugandan People's Defense Forces. So it's well known that you have a personal relationship with President Kagame. So you would have probably come for his inauguration. But beyond just your personal relationship with him, what significance does this particular inauguration, hold to you? And what significance does this inauguration hold for our region?
Let me frame it like this. If you look at international politics, what determines the position of a country in world politics? One is the size of its economy. The other is the size of its population. The third is its geostrategic position. Now, when I say if you have a big economy like America or China, you matter a lot. If you have a large population like China, the United States, or India, you matter a lot. And if you are geographically located in an area that is important for international trade or international military organization, take Singapore. The Straits of Malacca are one of the most important seaways to world trade. So that makes Singapore quite important. When you look at Rwanda, size of population, only 14 million. There's so many countries in Africa that have larger populations.
No, even cities.
Even cities, yes. Look at the size of economy, it's just 14 billion. You look at its geographical location, is of almost zero value. Yet, you have 27 presidents coming to Rwanda to attend President Kagame's inauguration. You have, just a few months ago, we had Ikwibuka, 3 months ago. And you had so many world leaders from France, from the United States, from all over the world coming to Rwanda. If you look at Rwanda, you see the presence of China, the prime ministers of India, Turkey, all major countries, the Secretary of State of the United States. Or if when you look at Britain, President Kagame is, I think, one of the most coveted leaders across not just Africa, but the world. Now you have 27 African presidents coming here. You ask yourself, why is Rwanda, a country that is poor, small in size, small in population, having such traction You have to ask yourself that question, why? And I think the greatest asset this country has, I think, is President Kagame. It's so difficult to avoid admiring this man. How he has somehow, and I want to use a negative word, smuggled Rwanda from obscurity, because there's nothing, almost nothing to offer the world. He has smuggled it and placed it on the international scene. Let me give you a few examples. Rwanda joined the Commonwealth in 2007. By 2022, 15 years later, actually should have been 2020, Rwanda was hosting the Commonwealth Conference, Commonwealth Heads of State and Government meeting. There's so many countries, members of the Commonwealth, who have never hosted it. Why tiny Rwanda? Look at the African Union. How on earth would Rwanda chair the African Union? It has been hosted here. Kagame has been chairman of the AU. When the AU wanted to reform itself, whom did all the presidents of Africa elect to lead the reform process? President Kagame. Why? So there is something special about this man, and he's such a valuable asset to Rwanda because he has somehow gotten Rwanda from nowhere and made it a global superstar. Just before I came here, I was communicating with the manager of Mayweather.
The boxer.
The boxer. You know, him and Picao want to host in November a match in Rwanda. To host a match between Picao and Mayweather costs $200 million. You know that. But Mayweather will come here next month, September. Elon Musk will come to Kigali in October. Why?
So wait, first of all, you're breaking news.
Yes.
Where are you getting all this information from?
Because I'm hooked into the international communication system and I get this information. So
according to
I was
Andrew
actually talking to the manager of Mayweather.
And he personally told you?
He wants Mayweather to come and congratulate President Kagame after his inauguration. He wants to come here in September. And
that's Floyd Mayweather.
Floyd Mayweather, yes.
Boxing legend.
Yes. And then they want, his manager was discussing with me, if you want to have a match in the world that the whole world will watch, it is between Picao and
Manny Pacquiao
and Mayweather. They want to host a match here. Elon Musk is coming to Kigali in October. That I can confirm for you. Formula One is coming to set up a track here, and they're going to be hosting Formula One in Kigali. You know that the stars of the European leagues come to Kigali. Not any other African country, not even South Africa, not Egypt, not Nigeria. I want Rwandans to ask themselves, why Rwanda? And I will tell you the answer. The answer, that answer combines many things. You have 27 African presidents. You go skim through all the inaugurations of all African presidents in the last 20 years. Tell me how many presidents have been there, African presidents. In Rwanda, 27 are coming tomorrow. President Kagame has demonstrated by his actions in the development of Rwanda, in managing Rwanda, he has demonstrated to the world an incredible lesson, high achievement, and everybody is attracted to this country. President Kagame is a very close friend of Macky Sall, the current president of Senegal, who is coming here, was an opponent of Macky Sall, but he's quoting President Kagame. The president of Gabon is coming here, but Kagame was a close friend of Ali Bongo. Every new president who comes in Africa wants to quote President Kagame. Why? Because he's a shining example of enlightened leadership in Africa. So this guy has grabbed Rwanda from obscurity and smuggled it not on just the African map, but on the world map. Just watch Davos. You'll see Kagame there. And when he's there, every major leader of the world will be talking to him, whether it is the former Prime Minister of Britain or the current President of the Rishi Sunak. You look at the Prime Minister, the President of France, Macron, or the Chancellor of Germany, or whatever important world leader is, you'll see President Kagame having meetings with them. Whether it is in business, in politics, in diplomacy, in practically, in religion, in religious affairs, the Pope, whatever it is, this guy is courted and sought by every person who matters in the world. In business, I've told you Elon Musk is coming here. When President Kagame visits the United States, he will go to the home of Louis Armstrong or visit the Oprah Winfrey. Even in entertainment, you have seen, I'm sure you have seen people like Matt Damon or Ben Affleck and other stars of Hollywood, great television stars of America like Ellen DeGeneres, come to Rwanda. Do you see them in the African country? It's incredible. Even me, who has had the greatest honor in the world, spend a lot of hours talking to President Kagame, I just can't understand this man.
Let's talk about the amount of time you've spent with him. And this is just from my own curiosity. How did you, a Ugandan journalist, not a politician, a journalist, end up being so close to the Rwandan head of state, President Kagame, that you are literally seen in his home and meeting his beautiful grandchildren? How does that happen?
You know, the first time I met him in 2001, it was like love at first sight. So I'll tell you the story. I come from Uganda to interview him. I used to host a radio show in Uganda called Andrew Mwenda Live. So I come to interview him. So I'm ushered into the interview room.
How old are you at this time?
Maybe 28.
So you were a junior, I mean, not a junior reporter at that time, but you're still a young man.
I'm still young in age, but well experienced in terms of journalism and politics. Remember that I started reading and cramming the speeches of the greatest of African leaders, Kwame Nkrumah, Kenneth Kaunda, Julius Nyerere, Sékou Touré, America Cabral, Samora Machel, Milton Obote, when I was between 8 and 12. I could recite speeches of these leaders, of my Nelson Mandela. So I had been from my childhood, I had been so involved in reading about African politics that it was almost my religion. So in 2001, I come here to interview President Kagame for my radio show. So I enter the room and we have short pleasantries and I do an interview with him. After the interview, we set aside the equipment of the radio and we enter a conversation. It lasted 3 hours. 3 hours. I have an article I wrote in Monitor 23 years ago about my first meeting with him. It was love at first sight. We talked for 3 hours about a broad cross-section of issues, politics in Africa, politics in Uganda, in Rwanda, in the East African region, in the global politics. And so during our discussion, there are things he said I was so interested and I wanted to record them because the interview was done. But I was technologically challenged. We were using MP3 players. So I couldn't reset it to record the extra. So I asked, can I go back to my hotel? Actually, I was staying with the current spokesperson of the Rwandan Army, Ronald Rivanga, who is like a brother to me. Can I go back home, call Kampala, and they tell me how to reset this recording, and then I can come and do just 10 minutes of interview with you? He said, yes, come tomorrow. So I secured a second appointment. It was a Saturday. I didn't even have clothes because I was leaving the next day. I postponed my ticket and now go wearing sportswear, track trousers, sneakers, and a t-shirt and a cape. And again, I asked that question for 10 minutes, and then we set aside the recorders, and we have a conversation, another conversation, 3 hours. At that time, Ron was one of his bodyguards, and Ronnie said, I've never seen the president speak to somebody for so long. In fact, the previous day, his PPS had come into the office to say, you have another meeting, and he had requested, very politely to her, can you postpone all my other meetings so that we have this conversation? So that's why I say it was love at first sight, because we're able to talk the first day 3 hours, another day, another 3 or 4 hours, long conversation. And from that time, I have been a very keen listener and student of President Kagame.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
But it's really interesting because you say 2001 and that he had just been president for a year.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so do you, remembering him as a president, so he had been vice president up to 2000, right after early 2000, he becomes president after Bizimungu is removed. And you met that man. You were much younger. He was also much younger.
Much younger.
When you meet him today, has he changed much?
Well, I can say that his intellectual bite has deepened. Has deepened, without a doubt. But even then, I was struck. First of all, I had very little knowledge of the man. I had the stories of Uganda, positive and negative, that is very strict, he's very tough. What I had not had in Uganda is that this is a person who is intellectually robust. If you sit with President Kagame to analyze an issue, it could be a military issue, it could be a business issue, a sports issue, a political issue. First of all, he's so rounded.
Yes.
It's rare to meet a human being like him. So his level of insight into things, I was so impressed, and the meeting lasted long because it's an aspect of him I did not know, that he is intellectually robust. He has a breadth of perspective and a depth of analysis that is so penetrating. And one of the reasons why I had to do a second part of the interview is he gave me insights about issues, and I felt I should have this recorded. In fact, I feel so bad that all the conversations and debates I have had with him, even where I have disagreed with him but admired his moral position on an issue, I may disagree with his analytical insight, but still admire his moral standing on it. I feel like I wish there were cameras recording these interviews, because I want the world to see that analyst, that intellectual in him, and he's often hidden. He's best in these private conversations. He's very, very, very insightful. I should tell you another thing. You know, President Kagame is a very simple person. In that sense, I'm very angry sometimes. I always tell him and the First Lady of Rwanda that I'm a very bitter man, because I can go to their home and get my camera, my phone, and record vignettes when he's at home. You know, when President Kagame is at home, he's a father, a friend, a grandfather, a husband. You don't see the President of Rwanda there. Very simple. So when last year we had General Muhoozi's birthday at his home, they took all our phones, because I have this tendency to record. I record these things at home, and I think his staff don't like it. Same Mwenda is exposing so much, and yet for me as a communicator, I think there's a video of him playing with his granddaughter that they posted. I have only 70,000 followers on Instagram, but it has been viewed by 1.5 million people, and people have big followings on Twitter and on because I put on my Twitter, I have 500,000 followers there. And other people put it on TikTok, it has been viewed more than 50 million times. So, in other words, but the staff, they have stopped me recording these private moments. And I think we need to get that personal Kagame, personal Janet Kagame, Paul Kagame, to the world. And people would learn so much more about them. My wife, I sent her this recording. She said, "Oh my God, I wish young people could see how the president relates to his wife and his grandchildren and learn about." And I tweeted my wife's comment on the video. I sent it to her. She commented. Then I tweeted it. I tweeted it when I was seated next to the First Lady. So I tweeted it and kept her busy so that she doesn't check the phone. So when we were at home, Ange comes in and says, "Oh, Andrew, that's a great video." I knew I had one, because the First Lady would have gotten angry. "Why did you get our private videos and put them out to the public?" And Ange came saying, "Oh, people," this 40 minutes later after I had posted it, Ange came in saying, "It is so great." So the First Lady was diffused. I knew I had won the war. And then it went viral, even up to now. So when we went for General Muhoozi's birthday, there is my wife, President Kagame, Muhoozi, and somebody else. And President Kagame is, in a very humble way, serving cashew nuts to everybody who was there and pouring for them their drinks. They had confiscated my phone, those people. The fact that I lost that moment, if I had a gun, I would have shot those who confiscated my phone. Because that is the PK I want Rwandans to see. I want the world to see that part of him. So I want them to see the very personal person, a friend, a husband, a father, a grandfather. The second person, I want them to see that analytical mind, a penetrating mind, analyzing global, regional, national issues, and also a breadth of perspective, how broadly informed he is. You know, Prince Kagame would be reading Bloomberg. They have a magazine, they do. He'll be reading Harvard Business Review. He reads so many things, and he used to share a lot of these things with me. It's incredible how much he reads. When he's watching soccer or any sport, note that he will tell you about the game, right? And analyze the skill and position of each player, but discuss the contribution of the manager to the game. But beyond that, he will discuss the business of sports, of the club. You know what I mean? So it's not just the game, but the business behind it, the skills behind it, the strategies behind it. It's incredible. I don't know where he gets this time to learn. You discuss with him aviation. You'll be surprised how much he knows about aviation. So he's that person, and it's so difficult not to admire him. Even if you tried, you'd find it very difficult not to admire the guy.
That is
and the lesson you should see, Sanny, that is why I just want to conclude this way. That is why you see, it's therefore for me, who has known him at a very personal level, I'm not surprised that you find people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Clinton, or Sarkozy, or Richie Sunak, or David Cameron, or whatever leader in Africa you think about, why they admire him, why they want to associate with him, stars in Hollywood, religious leaders, the greatest academics. I have 1 million academics every day asking me, can we have an audience with this guy and have a conversation? It's because he has demonstrated that he's a unique human being.
Yeah. Let's talk about another person that we can call a unique human being. That's your personal friend, General Muhoozi of Uganda. Rwandans, when he tweeted on his personal handle that he was coming to Rwanda for the inauguration, I went through the comments. A lot of the comments from Rwandans were extremely warm towards him. There is a feeling that, this is a person who helped thaw a very frosty Ugandan-Rwandan relationship. You know more than most not only what transpired to cause all the problems, but you also know what role he played personally to break the ice. Tell us, can you share some of your insights?
I would be reluctant to say many things.
Say what you can.
For purposes of confidentiality. But what I can say is, what Muhoozi demonstrates is two things. Extraordinary courage. And the second is a kind of Pan-African spirit. Even whenever Uganda and Rwanda have disagreed and fought, I don't know whether this is safe for me to reveal, General Muhoozi had never agreed with a lot of the positions the government of Uganda took against Rwanda. He retained a certain degree of emotional distance from the quarrels and addressed the matter from two perspectives. One, strategic interest. Rwanda is a strategic ally of Uganda. There may be subjective differences, but objectively, our destinies are intertwined. That is his first position. The second is that General Muhoozi understands that President Kagame is a reliable person. If you want to have an agreement with someone and you can trust them, and many people within the Ugandan leadership don't believe this or would want to erase it, if you want to have an ally whom you can trust that will be there for you in good times or in bad times, whether it rains or it shines, in winter or in summer, during the ups and downs of this mortal, veilful life. And now, this makes me emotional. President Kagame is a person you can rely on. And General Muhoozi knows that so well. And I think that the driving factor in rebuilding this relationship is that at his birthday, he did mention this because some people in Ugandan intelligence were manufacturing fake intelligence saying Kagame is planning to kill Muhoozi, Kagame is planning this. They wrote so many reports to MK in order to win him over from having a positive view of Rwanda and President Kagame. That Muhoozi triumphed over that, I think for me, is one of the greatest symbols of human resilience.
It's confusing to me because those who know me know that I have a huge affinity to the Ugandan people and the Ugandan state. Same with a lot of the majority of
not to
people.
mention that you are my grandnephew, your mother being from my great kingdom of Toro.
Yes. So there's a huge affinity. So when we were, of course, the affinity comes, with it's almost like siblings, right? So if you grow with someone,
sibling rivalry?
Not sibling rivalry. Like, it's not even rivalry. It's more of like when you have siblings, you go through ups and downs.
Yes.
But it's still your brother. It's still your sister. One day you fight, but that's your sibling. And I think that was the way we saw it. That, you know what, whatever happens, Uganda is our sisterly country, our brotherly country. That those people are the NRM. We are from you, and you are from us. So when things started going left, of course, the thinking was it could never go so left, right? Again, you self-correct. It's siblings. You self-correct. You get angry. You go back and you have a think about it, and you kind of self-correct. But in this case, it kind of did not feel like it was self-correcting, and that's where my confusion lies. Is that why was it not self-correcting? What about you'd mentioned, intelligence creating reports, trying to drive wedges. Why?
First of all, let me go back to the background. Uganda-Rwanda conflicts did not start in 2018. From 1999 to 2011, the Uganda-Rwanda relationship was very, very, very bad. In 1999 and 2000, Rwanda and Ugandan troops went to war in Kisangani 3 times. You remember that?
Yeah, sure.
Throughout the 2000s, in 2001, I think, the situation kept going worse. You should read my articles in Monta at the time. So in 2011, General Muhoozi and I discussed how to try to bring these countries back together. And we worked very hard, and President Museveni and President Kagame were able to bring them together from 2011 to around about 2017, 2018. Then things went south again. So the longest problem started in 99 to 2011. Those were 12 years. This 2018 to 2022 is just 4 years. You are focused on the 4 years, you forget the 12 years. So this has been a very, very difficult relationship to keep in good order.
But then that's the question, why? It should be the easiest.
Yes, I should tell you this. One, I have intimate knowledge of some of the drivers, and I think I am the wrong person to discuss this. Because remember that I'm involved in smoothing this relationship. So it would be wrong for me to say anything that may make things worse. So I want to leave the personal details and discuss the broader issues, which I've been thinking about, and I have discussed this with President Museveni and with President Kagame. The NRM government in Uganda and the RPF government in Rwanda share common characteristics. One, you have a group of people who launched a protracted armed struggle from a very small scale down in the village, and grew strong and strong and dismantled from below, and they dismantled the state from above. These kinds of movements, you find them in Mozambique, in Angola, you find them in Vietnam and China, you find them in Nicaragua and Cuba, movements like this. You find them in Algeria and Guinea-Bissau. Characteristics. And these characteristics, you can also find them in Russia. These characteristics remain almost similar across geographic space and historic time. What they say across time and space. Geographic space, whether you look at Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, Europe, or whether you look at time from the 1920s all the way to the 2000s. In each one of them, almost without exception, except a few, whenever one revolutionary movement has supported another in a neighboring country to take over power, and the other was succeeded in taking power, the two have gone to war. So in Ethiopia, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, supported the TPLF, Tigrayan People's Liberation Front in Ethiopia, to take over power. The two went to war. The NRM supported the RPF to take over power, they went to war. The RPF supported the Kabila, they went to war. The Russians supported the Chinese, the Russian Communist Party supported the Chinese Communist Party, the two went to war. The Chinese Communist Party supported the Vietnamese Communist Party to take power, the two went to war. So rarely, when they have shared a board and one has supported another, have they not gone to war. So I have this suspicion that there is something structurally obdurate in these movements, that when one supports another and succeeds, they end up fighting because it's so commonplace. So the details may differ, but the results are always the same. So I want to, in this sense, to give some flack to the people in Uganda I disagree with, and say maybe there's something inherent in these movements that lead them to this kind of situation.
So let's now talk about...
So I have clearly avoided... Because
personalizing it and going into the men.
If I was
involved.
going to the details, because these things may be structural, but there is always agency, human agency. And when I come to discuss human agency, I felt that in a lot of the discussions I was involved in, the Ugandan side did not exercise sufficient good faith. And if there was that good faith, maybe matters would have been resolved. And I say this because you should read my articles in 2018, 2019, 2020. I wrote a series of articles explaining my personal role, because I was President Kagame's envoy to President Museveni and President Museveni's envoy to President Kagame. And I was able to, as I was navigating it, I felt that it was humanly possible to arrest the slide. The only thing I have in my mind is that, okay, if this was humanly possible, why is it always common? And up to now, I need to find a theory to explain why these movements actually always go to war.
I guess it might just be, the idea, there's the egos of men. That's a huge thing. Like when you think about it, like, these are men who, from nothing, created something great. And men like that are great because they are stubborn and they have very strong views. And I'll also leave it at that.
Okay.
But I did also ask where the state of play is today. In your estimation, are things well now? And do you think that at a systemic level, things will be well for the foreseeable future?
I am very optimistic that the relationship will be a good relationship will be sustained, with ups and downs, of course. It will be sustained in large part because General Muhoozi is in charge of many things in Uganda now. And it is his personal conviction that a good relationship with Rwanda is not just good for Rwanda and Uganda, it's also good for the region. And that President Kagame is a trustworthy partner with whom we can do good business. And I think his role, I cannot overemphasize it. It's, I think, pivotal. It's fundamental to the sustenance of the relationship. And he's very committed to sustaining this relationship. That's why he's here. That's why he comes here. And he holds a very influential position in Uganda to sustain this momentum.
There's a saying that they taught us when we were studying high school European history. It was a quote by Prince von Metternich. If France sneezes,
Europe catches a cold.
Europe catches a cold. Now, in Rwanda's case, if Uganda and Kenya sneeze,
the region catches a cold.
We catch a cold. we catch not just a cold. We catch. We probably even get pneumonia, not even a cold. But what I'm now seeing when I look at the news from Nairobi in Kenya, what I'm also seeing when I'm watching NTV and UBC of Uganda and reading the Monitor, reading New Vision, I'm seeing the signs of someone about to, just before you sneeze, that deep breath. And then you can either somehow arrest the sneeze, or sometimes there's a litany of sneezes. I'm seeing those. I'm seeing those signs.
In regard to?
In regard to
the Rwanda-Uganda relationship?
No. So
the region?
Just in regard to themselves. Right? I'm seeing Ruto dealing with a lot. I'm seeing President Museveni dealing with a lot. I'm seeing young people on the streets. I'm seeing crazy headlines that don't make any sense to me. As a Rwandan, I was reading, someone sent me a couple of days ago a New Vision, a screenshot of the New Vision, I think of 2 or 3 days ago, saying the car of the IGP of Uganda was stolen from a police barracks. Now I was like, okay, this is madness. My head cannot compute with that headline. And those are the things when I talk about sneezes, because obviously we know what happened in Rwanda when there was a 2008 Kenyan crisis. I'm sure there were issues even in Uganda as well because of just how strategic Kenya is. Now, as strategic Kenya is, so is Uganda to us. So, as Rwandans, maybe this is me asking, should we be watching what's happening in Uganda and Kenya and thinking, this is nothing to worry about? Or to go back to what I'd said earlier, should we start looking for dawa tea and flu-fed and paracetamol because we need to start getting ready for a flu that is going to very soon come upon us?
First of all, I should tell you that politics is very difficult to predict. One time I was, I think, in Australia, attending a Davos conference there, and they made a presentation on these international global rating agencies like Moody's and S&P, and then they were looking at people like McKinsey, different international organizations that do these studies, the Carnegie Endowment or something, and they were looking at Tunisia and Egypt and making predictions. Mubarak is very strong. In the next 5 years, he'll be this and this. Tunisia, the economy is growing. The country has become rich and all this. And they're predicting the best there could be. And then, of course, within 6 months, these countries fell apart. The governments fell. So you could imagine how all these international agencies that do consultancies and studies were unable to predict what was going to happen. And sometimes when you see countries like Kenya and Uganda going through the problems that they are going through, you may easily predict disaster and failure, and it may be the sign that there's a book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Do you know him? He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, and one of the things he says is that systems that are permanently under stress, people are demonstrating and this, they get also to learn how to
deal with that stress.
To deal with that kind of stress. So they become accommodative. They become, in my language, Rutoro, where your mother comes from, there is also saying that the strength of a chain sometimes is flexibility, the bicycle chain. That the strongest tree is not one that is robust. It is one that is able to bend as the wind comes. It can bend either way, so the wind cannot break it down. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is that this could be signs of serious fragility, and these countries are going to explode. I don't know which of these two perspectives work. But what I can say is the challenges you see in Kenya are not challenges of failure as challenges of success. If you go to Kenya and look at the people who are demonstrating, their kids who are carrying mobile phones, iPhones and smartphones. They're highly educated, they're university graduates. I think that the success of the Kenyan economy over the last 22 years, has created a large educated and exposed middle class whose aspirations are growing faster than the rate at which the economy can create opportunities. So the mismatch between people's expectations and available opportunities is causing social frustration, and that social frustration is expressed in form of these demonstrations. How the Kenyan state and political system will be able to accommodate these shocks, I don't know. I think the same applies to Uganda, but in Uganda in a different way, in the sense that the government of Uganda has grown old and tired. It's ideological and intellectually exhausted. But it has presided over a very long period of 38 years of sustained economic growth. This economic growth has created a large and educated middle class. But the state that exists in Uganda is unable to meet even the most basic expectations of this middle class. I don't know when you were last in Kampala. Namlonge, I don't know what is it called. Namugongo, where there are these shrines, is 25 kilometers from the center of Kampala. You can drive from Kampala upon supermarkets, shopping malls, apartment blocks, housing, from Kampala all the way to Namugongo. 20 years ago, Namugongo was a village as rural as Kanyandahi, my home village, which is 320 kilometers from Kampala. Now, it's just a sprawling city. You drive from Kampala all the way to Mukono, it's one city. You drive from Kampala to Entebbe, the two cities have connected. So, private wealth in the form of homes, apartments, shopping malls, schools, it's incredible what Uganda has done. But on the ground, the ability of the state just to provide the basic infrastructure in critical areas, the kind of infrastructure you see in Kigali is almost zero. So one living in Uganda gets a sense that the country is in free fall. So how do you reconcile these two things? A rapidly growing economy, but a rapidly collapsing state capacity to provide basic infrastructure, especially in the Kampala and Wakiso districts where the capital city is. Because if you go out of Kampala, actually you go to Mbarara and Kabale, you go to Jinja and Imbale and Soroti and Tororo, you go to Gulu, Lira, Hoima and Masindi, you'll be surprised. City infrastructure is very good. The government of Uganda has done the roads there. But Kampala is a center of gravity. It produces 65%, Kampala and Wakiso districts produce 65% of our GDP and 75% of our tax revenues. And you're not investing in infrastructure. The most skilled Ugandans who produce with highest levels of productivity are stuck in jam 4 hours every day in the morning and the evening. And when they're not in jam, they're in garages repairing cars. You're spending so much money importing spare parts, because shock absorbers are breaking every day. The infrastructure of Kampala is like of a city that has been under civil war for the last 30 years, Mogadishu and Bangui. So these are the contradictions of Uganda, and I don't know where they will lead us. But I get the sense that you have almost an absentee state when it comes to physical infrastructure in the city.
It kind of sounds like you're telling us to wish for the best, but perhaps prepare for the worst.
Yes. So what they don't know, also remember that the NRM, by its very constitution, it has never, its social and political base has never been in the cities. It has always been in rural areas. And I don't know what Museveni's calculations are, but I feel like a city being a center of gravity. You see, if you put 10,000 people on the streets of Kampala, the police can disperse them. If you put 100,000, the police backed by the army can contain them. But if you put 2 million people there for the next 3 weeks, it can induce police and the army to join them. So remember, government can never fall unless the army shifts. You saw what happened in Bangladesh recently. The army shifted, refused to stop the demonstrations. Soldiers and policemen are also citizens of a country, and they suffer its indignities and problems. So if you need to understand that the city is a center of gravity. You know what I mean by center of gravity? The heart and nerve center of how a political system functions. If it becomes dysfunctional, whatever you have done on it's like you can have every aspect of you working very well, but if your heart is not working very well, it is the one that pumps blood to the brain, it pumps blood to the rest of the system. If the heart is clogged with cholesterol, and blood cannot saturate from the heart to the brain to other parts, that's the center of gravity, then it can cause the collapse of the system. So Uganda runs that risk, and I hope somebody in Uganda recognizes that there is a need, and this need is urgent, to invest in Kampala. As I say, it may not vote for the sitting government, and we don't. In the last election, President Museveni got less than 1/3 of the votes Bobby Wine got, and maybe that may be the allocation of resources may follow voting patterns. You reward those who voted for you, not those who voted against you. But Kampala is different in the sense that it is the heart and nerve center of Uganda, the center of gravity, and it's the capital city of the country. You know, you have 26 presidents here coming for just the inauguration. We had NAM, which has 100 and...
NAM is the non-aligned movement.
It had how many? It has how many members? 143. Then we had the G77, which plus China. You can hear there are 78 countries. About 88 presidents confirmed coming, heads of state and government. Finally, I think only 28 showed up. Why? Because they sent prior delegations. They entered Kampala. The city was filled with potholes, garbage, drainage problems, floods, whatever it is. They recommended at home, please, no, the prince cannot come, the place is not safe, and things like that. So if you mismanage your city and don't take care of it, you will face these problems. You have almost 60 presidents cancelling coming. Why is every president who books coming to Kigali coming? Because if they send the advance teams, they drive from the airport to the city and drive all around. What they see, they write back to the headquarters saying, oh, no, the place is great. The convention center is this. People come. So I hope that Uganda will learn these lessons, that you need to invest in Kampala if you want, whether they are tourists. If I'm an investor coming to a country, my first impression is of the city. If I enter a city that looks like a country that has been in civil war for the last 30 years, the first impression matters. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that those are the challenges Uganda is facing, and I'm hoping that in the next, because Uganda can actually address them, because you see, we have sufficient revenues. We may not be a rich country, yes, but we have, Uganda's GDP is now about $56 billion. Its budget this year is around about 52 billion. They say 72 trillion, but 20 trillion of that shillings is rolled over debt. So if I say 52 billion, is about close to 14 billion US dollars. Even if you devoted just 5% of that every year to invest in infrastructure in Kampala, you can have a city as good as, if not better than, Kigali. But the fact that we don't invest in that, really, I wonder what exactly are we thinking?
Let's talk about more dysfunction, but move away from Kampala and its potholes. Let's talk about the sick man of the region. Let's talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo. If you were a doctor trying to prescribe a cure to the malady that is Congo, what would that cure look like? And maybe I might even be asking you an unfair question. Maybe the question that I should be asking you is there even a cure?
Oh, exactly. Congo, for me, presents Africa with a very, very serious challenge. One, the country is geographically immense. And then it has a small population relative to its geographic size. That is one. So that makes it very difficult to broadcast power. You know what I mean by broadcasting power? If I have to build railways and roads to connect different people and villages to Kinshasa, to Kisangani, to Lubumbashi and other areas, it's so expensive. If you are saying expenditure on a road per person in Rwanda is very low. Rwanda is a very small country, 24,000 square kilometers with 14 million people. Rwanda is actually 10% of the population of Uganda. 10% of the land size of Uganda. 10%. But it has about 30% of Uganda's population. You see? About 30 or 28% of Uganda's population, yet it is just 10% of the land area. And Uganda is also one of the most densely populated countries in Africa. You know, in terms of geographic size, Uganda is number 33. Is the 33 largest country in Africa, but it has the 8th largest population. So Uganda is also densely populated. Now, when you go to Congo, it is so sparsely populated. To build a road from one place to another, if I'm to build 100 kilometers in Rwanda of road, it can serve maybe 5 million people. In Congo, it can maybe serve 100,000. You see the ratios. So that is a structural problem, and there I sympathize with Congolese leaders. The other problem of Congo is it is one country that has been so unlucky. It has suffered very poor quality of leadership, like now President Tshisekedi.
Have you met him before?
Not one-on-one. But I have met him when he's been in a meeting with others.
What's your impression of him?
In order not to, let me use a very polite word. I don't think he understands the challenges he faces. And if he understands them, I don't think he's able to see beyond his personal interest to be in power, as separate from the interests of the Congolese state to be stable. Because first of all, I should tell you, globally, let's take the global view. We have a new Cold War. This Cold War has two superpowers, the United States and China. China's economy in terms of purchasing power parity today is 35 trillion US dollars. The United States is about 30 trillion. So China has overtaken the United States. But in terms of nominal dollars, the United States is about 29 trillion, and China maybe is about 21. What does that mean for the US-China relations? If you are such a superpower like China, you need to move all around the world collecting raw materials to feed your hungry industries at home, right? Once these materials have come to your industries, you produce industrial products which you have to distribute across the whole world to sell. So you need sources of raw materials and markets to sell those goods, right? For you to have secure sources of raw materials, you need influence in those areas. If you don't have influence, your rival can come and block you or deny you access to those. Now, Congo is one of the richest countries in terms of mineral resource endowment. They have rare earth minerals that are right now at the inputs into cutting-edge technologies. Whether you talk of coltan, whether you're building rockets, whether you're building microchips or smartphones, you need Congo. So Congo therefore becomes a theater for international rivalry. The Americans want to have a stake, the Chinese want to have a stake, right? If you're Tshisekedi, it's important for you to understand the position of Congo in this international superpower rivalry. Remember, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. You are the grass, and they are two elephants. You think Tshisekedi, as you know him, has the capacity to comprehend this issue and position Congo to be an unaliened country that avoids being sucked into this rivalry? That's one. Two, Congo being large and therefore difficult to broadcast power, it has an absentee state in its eastern region. The absence of an effective state in the eastern region imposes severe risks to her neighbors, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and South Sudan, Central African Republic, wherever it is. Does Tshisekedi understand the implications of that? Because Rwanda has FDLR there, Uganda has ADF, all these people have risks resulting from a weak state. So if you are Tshisekedi and you're not just interested in personal power, but you're interested in the future of your country, Rwanda is an important and strategic ally in the stabilization of Eastern DRC. So is Uganda. Working with them should be your first priority. But every day you are antagonizing Rwanda. And I think that he's antagonizing Rwanda because he has called in the Americans, given them mineral concessions, in exchange for the Americans to help him fight Rwanda. So you're creating regional instability. How does that serve the interests of your country? Okay, they may serve your personal interest to stay in power, to lick the feet of the Americans, but how does it serve the ordinary Congolese? So I get the sense that the problem we have with the Congo is a very poor leadership, incapable of understanding the international assembled forces and how that country fits in. It's unable to appreciate the importance of regional neighbors in stabilizing that country. No, the East African community had agreed with Tshisekedi, and he personally signed that we shall put there an East African standby force to stand between the Congolese army and the M23 in order for them to negotiate a peace agreement and to implement actually an existing peace agreement. He chased away the East African force without consulting his peers. And typical of Africa's problems, he called in SADC, and I saw the South Africans also sending in the army without consulting also. SADC is a sister organization to the East African community. So it was in the interest of Ramaphosa to pick a phone and call Museveni, Kagame, and Ruto and say, hey guys, why is this guy chasing you away before me I deploy? Because I should reveal to you this. When the president of Mozambique called Prince Kagame, said, I need your military support. Prince Kagame said, no, I can't deploy in Mozambique unless there is a consent of SADC members. I'm not a SADC member. Rwanda is not a member of SADC. And until the member states of SADC said, no, we are not, we are okay with Rwanda coming to help you, that's when Rwanda deployed. Did you know that? So Kagame was sensitive enough to SADC so that he does not go there and appear like a spoiler. And Ramaphosa, instead of reciprocating this, so that shows you also the problems of African leadership. Why do you as SADC come to, or maybe the South Africans have certain mineral interests which make them ignore the regional effort? Remember, there is also the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, ICRC. Both the East African Community and the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region have the following position. One, that M23 is a legitimate organization with legitimate grievances and legitimate demands. And that the solution is not to fight, but to find a way to negotiate and arrive at an understanding. That is a recommendation of ICGRC. I remember in 2013, 2014, when we had these meetings, the ICRC even put up money to help Kabila integrate M23 into the Congolese army. And each East African country was supposed, ICGRC member was supposed to contribute cash. Kabila was the first to raise $20 million and put it on their account. Then the UN arrived and they said, we are the ones going to fund the resettlement and the integration and all this. The next day, Kabila returned and took away his money. The other African countries did not put in the money. Then the second rebellion started. Why? Because the matter was not resolved. I personally believe that as we enter this new Cold War, it's important that African governments understand that the best way to solve regional problems, rather national problems, is to use regional efforts. If you invite these international players who do not have teeth in the game, whose interests are at variance with our interests, they are likely to make a bad situation worse. And so I'm very, very unhappy with the action of SADC to intervene without consulting the East African community. I'm unhappy with the Tshisekedi pushing out the East African force. I'm even angrier with the UN. Read the US. The UN panel of experts and all this, they are really arms of the United States. The United States has its own interests there. Tshisekedi cannot see them. The Americans want to create divisions between Congo, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and others in order to, they can only promote their interests if when we are divided. And I find it so sad that we are allowing ourselves to be easily divided. And Tshisekedi is a big player in that.
So, is there a cure for the Congolese malady?
I have no idea. I think that the cure could be better leadership. If there's no better leadership, maybe to balkanize that country and break it into about 4 pieces. Yes.
When you were talking about the international community and the UN, I kind of laughed inside. I was reading the latest UN Group of Experts report.
Yes.
And there's a name that appeared of a well-known Ugandan journalist and political commentator.
Yes.
The name was Andrew Mwenda.
Yes.
According to them, you are pretty much part and parcel of the M23's diplomatic efforts in Uganda. How did you end up in that report?
This is another sad thing. Again, the Americans are manipulating the situation to their advantage. I was approached by M23. They came to me and said, look, we got a problem. When Tshisekedi was elected president, he invited us to Kinshasa.
When you talk about M23,
the top leadership of M23.
Like, so you're talking about Bisimwa, you're talking about Makenga?
Kanyuka, Lawrence Kanyuka came with...
He's the head of communications, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, but there are they have an executive of 9, and 3 of those executives were in Uganda, and they wanted to see me. Initially, I thought they wanted to see me because of journalistic reasons. Later, I realized it was different. They came and told me, look, when Tshisekedi was elected, he invited us Kanyuka Lawrence, who is a Luba from Kasai, same tribe as Tshisekedi, was the head of the M23 delegation. We went to Kinshasa and were there for 14 months. And we negotiated a peace agreement. And these are the terms of peace agreement. One of the terms was that we will integrate M23 into the Congolese army. In fact, they found that the M23 soldiers were still on the army payroll of the Congolese army. They were receiving promotions and salaries all these years. So it was...
Where was the money going?
You can easily tell.
Okay.
You don't need even to ask. So then, when they agreed on the agreement, they came, disarmed, surrendered all their weapons, and they were supposed to be moved to DR Congo, near the border with Angola. But then they wait for the Congolese government to send the logistics to take them. 1 month, 2 months, it doesn't work. So one day, the Congolese army shows up, FADC, and attacks their camp when they are not armed and kills many of them. That's how the second this new rebellion started.
The one in 2021. So
they said, look, we don't know. Since we had an agreement with Tshisekedi, we tried to reach Kinshasa, we couldn't reach him. His Minister of Defense, National Security Advisor, we can't reach them. We don't know whether the President is aware that this renewed conflict was actually precipitated by him or his army, not us. Maybe somebody is misleading him. We are aware that the Americans, the French, the Belgians, and the EU have influence in Kinshasa, and would like you to help us talk to the Americans, the French, and the Belgians, and the EU, so that we can establish an informal channel of communication with Tshisekedi, create a new understanding, and have this peace agreement we signed implemented. This is music to my ears. M23 want to reach an agreement, a peaceful agreement, with the government in Congo. So I called the French embassy, and they told me that prohibited from talking to M23. I said, no. Call your intelligence people in Paris, and we establish an informal channel of communication. Because I've read a lot of these studies, whenever the Americans, this is from my American experience, whenever the Americans have had a conflict with anybody, if they don't want to talk to them officially, they establish an informal channel of communication. Whether it's Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or the Taliban, they will have a channel of communication so that you know what your enemy is thinking and what is planning. In the regard to the Taliban in Afghanistan, this informal channel led to formal talks in Qatar, leading to the Americans' withdrawal. So you can declare somebody a terrorist, but don't take your personal biases and prejudices to cloud you of the strategic necessity to have some form of communication. So I told that to the French and they refused. I called the EU, and one of their guys came and met with them, and for 6 hours or 5 hours we talked, and he wrote voluminous notes. Because this guy who talked to them has had experience in Eastern DRC. I talked to the Americans, and they said, okay, our political secretary will meet them, but let us first seek permission from
Washington.
The next day they came to me in what I felt was an intelligence gathering expedition, saying, whom have they met in Uganda? I explained to them that in Uganda they cannot meet anybody of significance, because the government of Uganda is reluctant to meet with M23 because we have our forces deployed in Eastern DRC. Uganda is reluctant to antagonize, annoy, irritate DRC for them to have any suspicions. So Uganda tries to keep a distance from them, from M23. So the third day they called me and said, Washington has refused to give permission. When the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uganda called me to say the UN panel of experts have sent these following issues, the issues they were raising were saying that I was trying to help M23 lift sanctions on them. M23 never told me they had sanctions on them. They never raised it as an issue. The issue was, how do we implement the peace process? So it was clear to me that the Americans are the ones manipulating. You see, the UN is an arm of the US State Department, manipulating the United Nations to produce these reports in order to advance their hidden agenda in this region. And that hidden agenda, I don't have its details. I'm not able to read the feverish mind of the American diplomats and the other intriguers and whatever they want to achieve. But I felt that the Americans have an issue with maybe Uganda and Rwanda, and because somewhere in their final report, which is not in the letter they sent asking me to answer, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uganda, is to say Mwenda is the liaison person between Uganda and Rwanda, between Kagame and Museveni. So in other words, they're simply saying that the Uganda and Rwanda are working together to undermine Congo, in which case they are manipulating Tshisekedi to increase his belligerence against Rwanda and also kick Ugandan troops out of. So I hope that Tshisekedi in Kinshasa is able to see this for what it is, that they are trying to sow seeds of discord, because when we are divided, the Americans win. When we are united, they lose.
Let's talk about, I want to tap into your understanding of political economy and the state of our development and our underdevelopment. Countries like ours, Rwanda and Uganda, are landlocked and have gone through different things that are very, very problematic. Civil war, poverty, disease, all that. Some would say that we are destined to remain poor, in poverty, and insignificant. But both countries also have very lofty development goals, right? So Rwanda has its Plan 2050. I'm sure Uganda has something similar. You know both countries. You know what not the critics, because I really can't call them critics, but people who think, they look at us and they think, well, there's not much that's going to happen in these countries, these African countries. What are the chances that we actually reach those development goals that we aspire to, when we actually factor in all those factually true challenges that we have, which is landlocked, overpopulation, malnutrition, child stunting, etc., etc.?
It's very difficult to predict also the destiny of a country. If you look at studies that were done in the 1960s, they thought that African economies would perform better than Asian economies. In fact, studies comparing Uganda and South Korea were saying Uganda will be more developed or Kenya will be more developed than Malaysia or South Korea.
Really?
Yeah, in the 60s. And it turns out the countries that developed were those that the World Bank had written reports saying, there is very small chance of South Korea
and Vietnam,
things like that. So it turns out that the Asian countries prospered and the African countries failed. Also, if you look at the 1970s, Ghana had become a basket case, and Ivory Coast was a booming economy. Actually, one of the most successful economies in the entire world was Ivory Coast. But after the death of Felix Houphouët-Boigny in 1991 or 92, the country went downhill, then had a coup in 2000, and finally civil war, and it went downhill again. So Ghana, which had failed, by the 90s and 2000s became a booming economy. So it's very difficult to predict the trajectory of a country because of the unpredictability of social events. But what I can say, Africa has serious problems. But a lot of the structural problems we used to suffer have been overcome. For example, at independence, in 1962, Uganda, I don't think, had more than 5 or 6 engineers who were Ugandan. South Korea had about 58,000 engineers and technicians. It was a highly educated, skilled country. They had 1 million people working in factories in Japan who migrated back to Korea. They had universities from 500 years ago. They had a sense of national consciousness. I think there's a guy called Aldman and whoever. They did a study, Morris and Eldman. They did a study in 1967 looking at Korea, Taiwan, and these other African countries, and they found that although the per capita income of these countries in Asia was the same as Africa, but in terms of other factors that facilitate development, these countries were at the same level of advanced countries. Korea was better in many aspects than Britain. I have written articles on this. You should read these studies by Morris and Eldman. It's incredible what they were showing at that time. So Africa right now has overcome a lot of the problems it had. Let me give you an example of Rwanda. In 1994, when RPF takes over, there were only 21 medical doctors in Rwanda. RPF had 36 doctors in its own ranks. RPF as a rebel group had more doctors than the whole state of Rwanda after the genocide. The Supreme Court of Rwanda did not even have a single lawyer in the year 1994. At that time, the catchline of the Habyarimana government was umurimo nukuhinga ebindi namahirwe. Now you have one laptop per child. Do you see the kind of vision and the leap in vision? That time they thought cultivating cassava and bananas was what was work. Every single thing else was guesswork or gambling. But now you have investments in advanced technologies in Rwanda. So I think that right now, all African countries, I don't know about Congo, but Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania are building huge reservoirs of human capital. Universities are producing highly educated people. And I think that in the next 10, 20, 30 years, transformation is on the way. I'm very positive about Africa, actually. Even with all the governance challenges Kenya and Uganda are facing, and Tanzania, they are facing these challenges in the midst of a highly educated and skilled population, and they have higher chances of overcoming them. This does not take away the risk of catastrophic failure, but it shows that the chances of success are maybe 7 out of 10.
Let me ask you the last question. And this one might be a bit personal for me because I'm a child of both countries. And that's the Banyarwanda question in Uganda. It's a bit of a political hot potato. Not just now, it was a political hot potato during Obote II.
Yes.
It was a political hot potato around 1987, 98. 87,
89, 90.
Yes,
that's why the RPF
right?
the struggle here.
And it seems that it's something that keeps rearing its ugly head whenever it's close to elections, and it just manifests. And me as an observer, I've never truly understood what the problem was. Right? Uganda was one. Unlike Rwanda, was never a country to begin with. It was a creation of the British. Uganda Protectorate, and then it continues. So the issues of citizenship and the Rwanda and the Banyarwanda and what are we going to do with all these, it's for the amount of airtime that is spent and the emotions that get as hot as they do, I've felt that it was overkill.
Let me frame it for you. Uganda's relationship with Banyarwanda is a meeting ground of contradictory movements. If you go to State House Entebbe, you'll be surprised that the person who makes Museveni's bed is a Banyarwanda. Person who is responsible for estates, the toilet of the president, the housing, the renovations, whatever, is a Banyarwanda. At the height of our quarrels with Rwanda, if you saw our commander of the SFC, of military, of the chieftains of military intelligence, the mother was in Banyarwanda. Abel Kando, the mother was in Banyarwanda. You can find so many Banyarwanda working in very sensitive areas.
And even in unsensitive, some of them are just
But let me take
workers.
the sensitive ones, yes. So even the State House itself, don't forget that President Museveni and General Muhoozi had tweeted this the other day, has relatives here. So they also have a Rwandan ancestry here. To that degree, at the same time, I personally, so me who is saying this, I have written an article called Apartheid at Uganda's Immigration. There is this discrimination of Rwandans. If you go and declare that my tribe is a Banyarwanda and you want a Ugandan passport, they will subject you to vigorous scrutiny so that getting a passport is like in the Bible they say,
like a rich man going
through the eye of a needle. It will be exactly a camel going through the eye of a needle. So there are these two things that you have Banyarwanda in very sensitive positions in Uganda, in the Ugandan military, in the Ugandan police, in the Ugandan security services, even in State House.
And even in your beds.
Exactly. At that level, that President Museveni has that perspective of mind that he's able to acknowledge Banyarwanda as Ugandans and have them in such positions and is comfortable with it. Yet at the same time, you go to immigration, you find Banyarwanda denied passports, they denied this and that. It's so difficult to understand this bipolar policy. You know bipolar? So Uganda, in regard to Banyarwanda, has a bipolar policy.
But it's confusing because it's not something, like I said, there's a certain history to it. It's not just Museveni. It's something that we Rwandans
you
saw
could understand
even before
it,
that.
You could understand it under Obote too. When Museveni went to the bush, Obote actually argued that Museveni is a Banyarwanda. And Museveni tries to tribalize it. Obote was not a tribalist. You take it from me. I was very close to Milton Obote and I studied him closely. He did not seem to understand or take these issues of tribes seriously. But Obote was saying, you are Rwanda, you're not a citizen of Uganda, so you don't qualify to become a president of Uganda to run for president, which is understandable. He may have been wrong, but his premise was correct. The second thing is when Museveni went to the bush, President Kagame is a good example, Banyarwanda joined him. And Obote, who thought Museveni was Banyarwanda, joined by Banyarwanda therefore, as a people became a problem. That's understandable. But Banyarwanda, Museveni's power base. If you go to Kisoro, Museveni gets 98% of the vote. In the last election, he got 96% or 94%. So, Banyarwanda in Uganda support Museveni actually. There are many Banyarwanda outside of Kisoro, in Ntungamu, in that Kato corridor, all the way through Chankwanzi, Nakaseke, Gomba areas, Sembabule. And they are the biggest support base of Museveni. At the same time, the infrastructure Museveni has in immigration denies Banyarwanda passports, But they give them national IDs, but passports becomes an issue. At the same time, if you come to the business community in Uganda, Banyarwanda are prosperous businessmen in Uganda. In fact, every arm and leg of Ugandan business, the Ugandan business is filled with Banyarwanda who are prosperous. So we have a bipolar relationship with Banyarwanda and Rwanda.
Do you ever see it getting less? But is there a medication for that bipolarness?
Sometimes as I have grown older, I have come to believe that not every problem has a solution. Some problems are not there to be solved; they are there to be managed. So Uganda is not going to solve the Banyarwanda problem. We will find a way to manage it. The problem will remain as we manage it along. I don't see the solution now. Maybe when another government comes in, it may take a different form. Because I feel like there is a certain discomfort with the Kigali in certain quarters in Uganda, which powers into the Banyarwanda community. Maybe some are going to be Kagame spies. Okay. So I was one time, I have kids I help. One of them is a Banyarwanda kid. I got him a scholarship to go study in Germany. He was 16 years. The Uganda government denied him a passport. He couldn't somehow prove that his great-grandparents were in Uganda in 1926. Even I, Mwenda, cannot prove it. Museveni cannot prove it. What is the evidence you would provide? A grave, the jawbone of your great-grandfather, and you dig up a grave? You see, it's such a stupid thing required by the Constitution. Anyway, I could not, up to now, I will never forgive my own country that a kid who cannot speak one word of Rwanda speaks Luganda like better than any Muganda I know, was born in Uganda, grew up in Uganda, his father was born in Uganda, grew up in Uganda, his grandfather was born in Uganda, grew up in Uganda, and somehow they cannot find their great-great-grandfather's grave, that you deny him an opportunity to get a passport, to go and study, have a scholarship in German and study. Me as an African, even if that kid was a Ghanaian, and I'm a Ugandan in charge, I would give him a passport. Why not? Nkrumah gave so many Africans fighting to liberate Africa passports of Ghana. Museveni gave passports to the South Africans fighting for apartheid. Why not give a kid of Rwanda 16 years to go and study in Germany? Please, Sanny, give me that explanation. And then you have a bureaucracy that you are a Pan-Africanist in Africa. For me, these things really tell me something fundamentally dysfunctional about us Africans. That a kid who can't speak a word of Kinyarwanda, who speaks 100% Luganda, grew up in Uganda 16 years, has a scholarship to go and study in Germany. The scholarship is time-bound. He needs a passport. This boy cannot come to Rwanda and anyone gives him a passport. If they give him a passport, it's because Rwandans are Pan-Africanists. There's nothing in him except his name. His name was Innocent Kagame. That's it. Why would Rwanda give him a passport? He can't even speak the language. He looks like any other Ugandan. He could be as well him or Mhuma from Toro. You get what I mean? He was denied a passport by the government of Uganda. The passport was issued but was not handed to him, and he lost his scholarship. I will never ever forgive that. And this was a kid in my care. 16 years.
I mean,
so that is your bipolar.
That is very bipolar.
So I am happy that the interview has ended at a note where I'm very, very angry with my own country. You know, as a child growing up, I should tell you this, Sanny, I read Kwame Nkrumah. That man, I admire him like nothing. And the only person who has approximated him is President Kagame. It's so easy for an African to come to Rwanda to get a passport. You know, so that is one. Many Africans can easily find it a place to come and get a passport. But you see, it's even contradictory because many Africans can go to Uganda to get a passport. They can come from Senegal, from Nigeria to Ghana and get passports. Even those who are struggling for whatever it is got passports under Museveni's Pan-African ideas. Why Banyarwanda kids? You know, I have so many Banyarwanda friends I know in Uganda who have never been to Rwanda. A few days ago, I sent a Banyarwanda friend of mine. I asked him, what's your tribe? He said, I'm a Muganda. He's a Banyarwanda by tribe. Both his parents are Banyarwanda and they speak Kinyarwanda. He has no connection to this country. So I said, you need to go and visit that country called Rwanda. Right now as I speak, he's here. I think he's leaving tonight to go back to Uganda. But he identifies himself as a Muganda. Why? Because he was born and grew up in Uganda. His parents were born and grew up in Uganda. Although both speak Kinyarwanda, he can't speak a word of Kinyarwanda. I have so many friends. I cannot list them on here. I can recite 100 of them in 1 second. Who are Banyarwanda, both parents, and they can't speak Kinyarwanda. They're born in Uganda, and the government of Uganda wants to deny them passports, and the immigration officials, who cannot prove that their great-grandparents were in Uganda in 1926 when the final borders of Uganda were drawn, They can't prove it for themselves, but they want Banyarwanda to prove it. It's absurd. And when I wrote that article, apartheid at Uganda's migration, there is not a single senior Munyarwanda, whether it's Captain Gad Gasatura or Augustine Ruzindana or Innocent Bisangwa. You know, the prominent Ugandans, the former Ugandan Solicitor General and DPP, Peter Kabatsi, everyone was calling me. You know, our Deputy Chief Justice, Munyarwanda, Richard Butera. You see, we have so many Banyarwanda in Uganda. They are, in the 1969 population census, they were the 5th largest tribe in the country. You get it? So Uganda has had a very progressive Pan-African policy on these passports, and Museveni personally has supported and promoted Banyarwanda in sensitive positions, as I have told you. Yet at the same time, this bipolar policy is what I don't understand. What breeds and sustains it?
No, it's tough. It's tough. And I just want to thank you for speaking so passionately about the issue. It's an issue that I feel quite strongly about, but I prefer not to sometimes get involved. Just in case I also one day want to get a Ugandan passport and they say, we've heard what you say.
If you used your mom, because she's a Mtoro, they would find it difficult to deny your passport, because any of your parents who is a Ugandan, you get a passport.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the long form. It was an absolute pleasure. A lot of the stories that you were able to share with us, some of them I know, but some of the personal insights that you have about General Muhoozi, President Kagame, the DRC president as well. Some of them are new to me, and they will really help me as I continue formulating my opinions about what's happening in the region. Thank you so much. I hope to perhaps visit you in Kampala.
When you come to Kampala, I'll take you to my village in Kanyanda, then I'll take you to visit your mom as well.
That would be nice.
But thank you so much for also inviting me to this podcast.
And I really do think, we're speaking about it off camera, I really do think that yours is a voice that should join this platform. This is new. This is what young people are listening to. And if you are tired of talking to the same old men, pun intended, this might be where you want to speak to the new African.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for inviting me. I have really enjoyed this show.
All right, great. If you enjoyed the conversation today, share your thoughts with us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.